Hi everyone. So today is Q&A day. If you have questions, put them in the comments. If you're watching on the replay and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments as well. The point of today is to answer your questions, okay? So make sure you ask your questions in the comments. I did get questions ahead of time, so I will be answering those as I go along. But if you're here live, I am going to answer your questions. So make sure you ask me your questions. If you do not know who I am or why you should even ask me a question, I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Lilian, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. Even though it's changing all the time now, okay? It has been changing since the 20th of January, but it's still there and we are going to keep using it to get green cards and citizenship. So make sure you ask me questions. Hi, Francisca. Make sure you say hi as well if you're joining me live. I already see questions coming in. Great. So make sure you're asking your questions, okay? And I'm just going to jump into the questions. There's not, like I said, today's Q&A day, so jumping right into questions, ask your questions. Mercedes is asking, my mom filed a N336, paid the fee, gave the proof that her documents was sent in before the date they asked, and they denied it. What can she do? So at that point, she can either refile or sue, right? Those are really the options available. You can either refile the N400, which is what led to needing the N336, but it also depends on the reason why they denied it. So if they denied it saying that they didn't receive the N336 on time, you could sometimes be able to get the field office to reopen it because with proof that you send it in on time and all of that. But worst case scenario, you may just need to refile the N400, or if you want to not refile the N400, you may just have to sue the government. Okay. So again, it depends on the reason for it. And oh, Mercedes is asking if she can join the live. Unfortunately, I don't have that set up yet. That is going to be coming up in the future, right? We're gonna do a trial run soon with that. Actually having people come on and ask their questions. So I don't have that yet. Cruzen is saying that he is not getting audio. Please let me know if you are also not getting audio on your end. Okay. My settings show the audio should be working, but please let me know in the comments if you are hearing me. If you are not, please let me know so I can work on fixing that before we get any further into this. All right. Okay. I don't see anyone saying that they are not hearing me other than cruising. So maybe check your settings. I did work on my on my stuff. So hopefully you can hear me once you check your settings. Okay. So Eddie is asking, I came to the USA on a student as an F1 student and dropped out from school because I couldn't pay my fees. I just got married to a US citizen, but we haven't filed the application yet. I have already working with my social security and check on my I-9 form that I am authorized to work. Okay. If there's a specific question to that, Eddie, please feel free to ask it because I don't see a question. Okay. But feel free to ask the question that was leading up to. All right, Mercedes. They lost her M400 in the mail and found it later on. Then sent her mail saying file an N336. We did that, and they still keep sending the mail back. Okay. I would want to see the basis for them sending it back. Okay. Typically, I wouldn't want to see the, whatever they send back with the forms, the documentation asking you to file the N336, because that's what's going to tell me exactly what the situation is and what you can do. And if she already passed the citizenship test, there may just be something holding it up on their end. But there's really no way to know other than um yeah. So other than following up on it, so I'm just going to, hopefully this should show on Instagram as well. So on the bottom of the screen, you can schedule a strategy session with me. It's a free 15-minute session where you get to ask me questions and I can review the document. So feel free to schedule that and then email us your documents ahead of time. Okay. All right, Francisco. My daughter filed I-130 and I-485 since March 2023. Responded to an RFE in November 2023. It's still pending. Only received work permit and advanced parole. Unfortunately, that can be normal depending on which field office you're in. Okay. This is where the I-485 really makes a difference, is depending on which field office you're in, it can take, 6 months to a year to get your green card, or it can take 2 to 3 years. It really depends on your field office and how quickly they are processing cases. So there's certain field offices that get so many applications that they're just not able to get through all of them quickly enough. So you would want to look at the processing time for your specific field office. Do not look at the processing time for your I-130. That's not what you need to look at. You need to look at the processing time for the I-485 and your specific field office, because that's going to tell you how long your specific field office is taking on those applications. And that's how you will know if your case is within normal processing time or if it's outside of normal processing time. Typically, if it's within normal processing time, there's not really much you can do to move it along unless you have a reason to expedite the case. But if you do not have a reason to expedite the case and it's still within normal processing time, there's not really much you can do. However, if it's outside of normal processing time, now you can do a service request. You can follow up with USCIS. You may be able to get congressional assistance with your case. So really need to know if it's within normal processing time or outside of normal processing time. And that's going to basically dictate what you do next. Okay. Eddie, will that be okay. So Eddie's asking if putting on his I-9 that he has work authorization would affect his green card application. So typically, that is not what would affect your green card application, because someone that's married to a U.S. citizen is considered immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, and immediate relatives of U.S. citizens get a waiver automatically just by being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen for working without authorization. So working without authorization is waived if you're an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. Okay, so that's number one. Typically, when you have your interview and the officers may be asking you about your work history, one, you need to be honest about your work history. Okay. And then two, they're really looking to see if you checked off the box that says you're a US citizen. That's what they're looking at. Because if you check that box, you are not getting a green card. You are going to end up in deportation proceedings. That's why they ask about your work history. Not to, say, oh, because you worked without authorization, you're not getting a green card. They just want to see if you told your employer that you were a US citizen. So now they can say, you have a false claim of citizenship. And because you have a false claim of citizenship, you cannot get a green card. And matter of fact, not only are you not getting a green card, you are now in deportation proceedings. So working without authorization on its own without any false claim of citizenship is waived. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. Next question. My husband is here in the US. We've been married for 1 year. Is it a good time to fill out his documents? What forms would I need? All he has is work permit and temporary social, but Trump is canceling it earlier than when it expires. Okay. So it depends. So it depends on if he came in with parole or um came in with a visa. So if he came in with parole or came in with a visa, and the parole is unconditional parole, right? There's no conditions on his parole, then you can file for him. I know you've been married for a year. You didn't really need to wait. If he had lawful admission into the US, there's no reason to wait. So you can file for him. The documents you will need, again, this is if he had lawful admission or parole, would be an I-130, an I-130A, the I-485, the affidavit of support. So those are the regular documents you'll need to include. And then if you are also looking to get him a work permit or a travel permit, you would want to include the I-765, which is the work permit, or the I-131, which is the travel permit. So those are the forms that you typically want to include. And then, of course, include all the supporting documents that go along with that. Okay. Um, okay, I'm going to put this up because you have been joining me on these lives for so long, and it's happening. It's happening. Um, I am so happy for you. I am so happy for you. I celebrate every single time someone that watches me gets their visa. Excuse me, getting over a cold. But so this live may not be as long as usual if like the cough becomes a constant. But anyway, I am so proud of you. Okay. I always tell people the purpose of these lives, the purpose of doing these videos is to give you as much information as possible, right? I don't care if you work with me or not. Okay. I am still going to celebrate you because it is so hard going through the immigration system. The US immigration system is complex and it takes forever. So going through that system and coming out on the other end with your visa and a travel date already, congratulations. So happy for you. Hi Jay, thanks for joining. Let's see. What happens if you don't register with DHS at all? So we don't know. Okay. I really like we don't know. Unfortunately, there's no definite like this is this is what's going to happen. There's been rumors of what's going to happen. They may make it so that if you didn't register when you're supposed to register, you may not be able to then get status through other means later on. There's rumors that he wants to charge almost $1,000 a day for anyone that didn't register for every single day they go without registering. One thing I want to make clear though, okay? One thing I want to make clear when it comes to the registration is depending on your particular status, if you already have a work authorization, right, you don't actually have to register, right? You don't actually have to register if you already have a work authorization because they already have your information, right? They already know where you are. They already have your fingerprints. They already did their background checks. So it really, like, the people that it affects are not, it's not everyone. Let's make that clear. It's not every single person in the US needs to register. It's really like specific groups. So don't be, don't be rash with your decisions, okay? Um, let's see. Okay. I think that is okay. Eddie, great question. Is it true? I'm just going to put that so people can see. Is it true that the form I-693 never expires? So, for those that don't know what this form is, it's the medical exam report. Whenever you're filing for a green card in the US, unless you came in with a K1 visa, you have to do the medical exam. And as of 2023, I want to say, it no longer expired. Before, you had a year and then it expires and you have to do it all over again. But now, as long as you did your medical before that deadline, I believe it's November 2023. As long as you did your medical after that date, it does not expire. So you just have to do it the once. You don't have to pay again to do it, which is great because now they're taking forever to get to green card interviews. And I know that was an issue for my clients because you'll do the medical, send it in with the application, and they will take forever. And then before the interview, you will look, it already expired. They need to do a new medical. So we got into the habit of not even sending in the medical and taking it to the interview because of the how long it's taken and the fact that it was expiring. And then now you have to send in the medical with your application. So it's a good thing that they made the change that it never expires, because if you're sending it in with your application, which is required now, and it expires, you have to do it all over again. So it doesn't expire as long as it was done after November 2023. Okay. So that is a good update. That's actually helpful to people. If you have done medicals, can you still be denied citizenship? It depends. So when it comes to citizenship applications, there's no medical exam requirement for citizenship applications. There's only medical exams required for green card applications. So in those situations, if you did not do your medical, or if you did not get certain vaccinations that are required for the medical, you may end up having your application denied unless you go ahead and get those vaccinations. But can not doing a medical cause your citizenship to be, your green card to be denied? Yeah, so even if you've done your medical, your green card application can still be denied if there's other basis for them to deny it. So if your medical came out clean, there's nothing that makes you inadmissible based on your medical exam. The medical exam itself will not be the reason that your green card application is denied. There has to be another reason. So, can it still be denied after doing the medical? Yes. Okay, it can, but the medical typically is not the reason unless you have something in there that makes you inadmissible. Okay. How many photo evidence do you need to provide to USCIS? There's no number. There's no number, right? We've done it with 10, we've done it with 50. There's no number. It's just, what does the pictures show? If it's pictures from the same event, right? Does USCIS need 100 pictures from your wedding? No, they don't. I promise you, they do not need 100 pictures from your wedding or from the same exact event. They do not. Just be conscious of what you're presenting and make sure that you're labeling the pictures. That's what really matters. They want to know when, where, and who are in the picture. Okay, when was it taken? Where was it taken? And if it was an event, what event was it? And if there's other people other than the spouses in the picture, who are those other people? So that's what really matters there. There's no specific number. Okay. Got married on November 2024 and submitted I-130 and I-485 in February. She came through humanitarian parole program. Is she saved you from deportation? Uh, okay. So because that program is ending, she no longer has parole. However, because you filed the green card application before the parole was taken away, there is a possibility that she will have, protection. Again, with this new administration, I can't really say 100% sure she'll be safe, but with the application pending, there is a possibility that she would not be considered a priority for the administration. However, as you probably know, or if you all don't know already, people that came through that Biden administration humanitarian parole program in Bahrain, I know that your fiance is from your wife now is from one of those countries. You want to be aware that although USCIS will accept the application and process the application, there is a pause on actually approving the application. So they're going to hold on to the application. They may go through the process of making sure she qualifies for the adjustment of status, but until that pause is lifted, they are not able to actually approve the green card. So if it's taking time for things to happen, just know that that's also happening on the back end, where USCIS is basically in a position where they have applications that they can process, that they are able to process, but they are not able to actually approve them at the moment until that pause is lifted. Um, does my biometrics for work permit? Okay, do my biometrics for work permit. It has been 16 days since I did biometrics. How long will it be before it's approved? I'm at step 3 of step 4 of I-485, saying interview completed. What does that mean? Okay. One thing I will say is if you are looking at the online account and it's telling you you're in step 3 of step 4 and it's giving you like a date of when things will be completed, please do not rely on that. Okay. Check your case status on the uscis.gov website. The online account it has bugs. Okay, it is not great with actual, like, it's not telling you what's actually happening in your case, so don't fully rely on it as what's going to actually happen in your case. As far as the work permit, just know your work permit application does not stop processing, so USCIS doesn't start actually doing anything on it until your biometrics is completed. So let's say you filed it a month before you did the actual biometrics, they're not going to look at it. They just see that, okay, you filed it and there's biometrics issued. You do your biometrics, then it gets in line to get in front of an officer that will then approve it. Okay. It doesn't mean that the second you do your biometrics, they're able to approve it because they haven't started working on it yet. But as far as how long does it take, typically 6 to 8 months from the time you file. Okay, that's the typical processing time. If you have a job offer, if you have a financial hardship that makes it you know, urgent for you to get your work permit sooner rather than later, you can do an expedite request with your job offer. We did one for a client, and within a week of sending in the job offer and the expedite request, they had their work permit approved. So it really depends on your situation, basically. Depends on your situation. But if you qualify for expedite, that may be the best way for you to get that work permit faster. About the registration, I heard from an immigration attorney that if USCIS got fingerprint and took your picture when Biden parole for spouses was up, then you would not need to register. Since USCIS has your information already, of course, not all applicants got to the biometrics phase since it was eliminated by judge. That is true. So if you have gone through biometrics, that means that USCIS already has your information. The reason that they want the registration is to get your information, your biometrics, all of that. So going through, if you have gone through that process, so people that have had a work permit, for example, you have done biometrics. You cannot get a work permit without having done biometrics. So those are considered exceptions from the registration requirement. Okay. How long do you think your case will take at MVC before you're going to be called for an interview? And if your case took over a year at MVC and um, your case doesn't call for an interview, what would I do? Okay. So the embassy, unfortunately, is the wild, wild west of immigration. Okay. Each embassy has their own process. Each embassy has, you know, their number of staffing that determines how much they can actually do. Okay. So I will tell you this, if you are fortunate enough to have to go through the US embassy in, you know, in the UK, you're going to have a very short waiting period from the time you are documentarily qualified by MVC to your interview, like 6 months or less. Okay. However, if you are in, let's say, Nigeria, the time frame from being documentarily qualified to having an interview can be up to 2 years, if not longer. So it's really important that you don't, there's so many things online where people will be like, it only took me 6 months to get to an interview, or it took me 5 years to get to an interview. It's really important to not, judge your case based on other people's cases, because they may not be at the same embassy as you and they may not have the same exact situation as you. So, how long does it take? It depends on the embassy, unfortunately. It really depends on the embassy and how quickly they are scheduling interviews and how long they were closed during COVID. That's a huge one. Okay. How long they were closed during COVID tells you what the backlog is going to be like. So I always like to use Nigeria as an example. During the first Trump administration, there was the travel ban, which meant that cases were not being interviewed and visas were not being issued. And then after the travel ban, or during the travel ban, COVID happened. So that's another backlog of years of no interviews. So that now they're trying to catch up, but it's going to take years for them to catch up if they ever do. Okay. So depends on your embassy. I am a US citizen. I will travel to Egypt and have an Egyptian passport. What is the best way I do visa or enter with my Egyptian passport? It's really up to you. That's something that people are so afraid of, that it's not. You're a US citizen, right? You are you are allowed to be a dual citizen, and you are allowed to travel into Egypt with your Egyptian passport. Okay? You do not need a visa to Egypt if you do not need an Egyptian visa if you are a citizen and have your passport. So that's something to keep in mind, is that I know there was a lot of discussion, there's a lot of rumors, but I'm telling you, I have not seen one verified account of someone actually being denied entry into the US because they went into their, other country of citizenship with that country's passport. Okay, just make sure you have your US passport on you. Okay, that's really it. Make sure you have your US passport on you. But do you need a visa? Those are rumors. Okay, those are rumors. Mercedes, what can I do? I don't work and can't pay the fee for an N400. I've been here 29 years, came here as a newborn. I'm married to a US citizen for 10 years. He don't want to pay for me to obtain it, but I need it for my career field. What can I do? I never had a job. So okay, so you tried to do a waiver, but they said you needed more proof, but I don't have any. Okay. So in order to do a fee waiver, you need to show your income size for your household. So the income for your household, if your spouse unfortunately makes a lot of money, you may not qualify for the income base. Okay. Also, you may want to look at, do you actually have any receive any government assistance? So reduced, for example, health insurance. Is it government based or is it private? Or is it private? And if it's private, you know, unfortunately that wouldn't work. But if you have any sort of means-based government assistance, you can use that to show that you meet the income requirement for the waiver. But if you don't have any of that, unfortunately, they will not be able to do that waiver for you. There is a reduced fee option depending on household income. But again, it's still going to depend on your household income to do the reduced fee, which I believe is like $380 instead of $760. So that's something to keep in mind as well. For anyone out there, if you do not qualify for the fee waiver, you may qualify for a reduced fee depending on your household income. All right. Eddie, do I need a certified copy of my spouse's divorce certificate or uncertified one is okay? So marriage certificate, divorce certificate, birth certificate, court records, all of them needs to be certified. Okay. USCIS, the embassy, they do not want any uncertified copies because they have no way of verifying that it's actually real. That's what the certification does. It tells them that it came from this government agency, from this court. That's what it tells them. So you need that certification to prove that your document is real. Okay. So it is required to be certified. How long after biometrics is your interview? If it's a marriage-based case, the biometrics has nothing to do with it. The biometrics is like the first step in the process. So once you have your biometrics, then your case starts getting processed. If it's a green card application, you need to look at the processing time for that green card application based on where you live. It's different for each location. Some places it can be 6 months, some other places it could be up to 2 years. So it really depends on your location and the field office that you have. Okay. What are the qualifications for an expedite? So, like I said, you need to look at financial is typically the reason that a work authorization would be expedited. So you need to see if you have things to show financial hardship that would lead to an officer agreeing that you should have your application expedited. Like I said, we have been successful with doing an expedite with work with job offers. So where someone has a job offer ready to go, They're already interviewed. They're already, the employer is ready to hire them. They're like, here, this is how much we can pay you. This is everything that you would, your qualifications, everything. You are hired, except we need proof that you are legally able to work in the US, right? So if that's the thing that's missing, USCIS may be able to expedite it with that job offer, but it needs to be a job offer in writing. Okay, not, oh, I can't apply for a job because of X. No, you have a job offer. So just to clarify, no need to register under such situation. So that is the kind of, because of the reasoning behind the registration. No, because the reason is for them to get your information, and they already have your information. So in that situation where you already done your biometrics, they have your fingerprint, they have your picture, they have everything they need. If they were to, let's say, try to enforce, um, then they can do that. And that's what the registration really is all about. Oh, thank you, Manny. Really appreciate it. So if you haven't, just do what Manny said. Give this video a like. Thank you so much. Alright. MS entered US, used someone else's passport in 2016, now married to a US citizen, applied TPS last year, but USCIS requested to apply for a waiver. Do you think we can apply for AOD after we send RFE as well? I'm not sure what AOD stands for in this situation. Oh, AOS. Okay. Adjustment of status after we send RFE as well. So you can apply for adjustment of status. You will need a waiver for the adjustment of status. Just so you know, the waiver for the TPS is different for the waiver for adjustment of status. So keep that in mind. You will need a separate waiver for the adjustment of status. But can you? Yes, as long as the passport was not one for a U.S. citizen. That's the key. If the passport belonged to a U.S. citizen, no, nope. There's no waiver for that. But if it did not belong to a U.S. citizen, then you can apply for a waiver based on extreme hardship to your U.S. citizen spouse. And we have done that before. So, yeah. How much is your consultation? So I offer a free 15-minute strategy session, and then I also offer a longer consultation, which is $75. If you go on my website, you can book either one of those. Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, it really does help. Casmita, hi, how are you? It's been a while. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right, guys. If you have questions, please put it in the comments. You all have had some amazing questions today. I haven't even had to, do some of the ones people sent ahead of time. So thank you so much. But if I don't see any other questions, I may take one of the ones I got ahead of time. Okay, so be sure to ask me your questions. All right. So I got this question and I just wanted to highlight it because it is one of the differences between the US and other places when it comes to getting permanent residency. So the income requirement, this person is asking specifically about the affidavit of support. Are there also size of housing requirements? Because apparently in the UK, they have a housing size requirement where if you are, filing for your family to join you, but you only live in a studio apartment, you could actually end up not being able to sponsor them because of the size of the home that they will be joining you in. That's not a thing in the US. That's not a thing. The US government just wants to know, can you afford to take care of the people that you're sponsoring? If you cannot afford to take care of the people you're sponsoring, then you're not going to get it. If you meet the income requirements for the affidavit of support, it is kind of built in that you will be able to afford a place that is suitable for you all to live in, right? That is an assumption that's made from the affidavit of support. So, do we need to know if you have a studio apartment or a 10-bedroom house? US government does not care unless you're using that 10-bedroom house as assets for your affidavit of support. Okay, they don't care. They just want to see your income and that you can afford it. Next question. If you met someone online who has sick who has sought for asylum and work permit and you got married, how long would you think it take to put on your case and how to go about that? It depends. So if, let's say, again, this information is not in your question, but just assuming that the person is a US citizen that's getting married to someone that's seeking asylum, it depends on how the person seeking asylum came into the US. If they came into the US with a visa, right, or with parole, they had authorization to enter the US, then the US citizen can sponsor them. They can file a petition for them. So again, that would be the relative petition, then the affidavit of support. If they are physically in the US and they entered with authorization, then you can do those things together. If they are seeking asylum and have a work permit, another question is, are they in immigration court proceedings or is their asylum pending with USCIS? Two completely different situations. If it's with USCIS, then you can typically do the I-130 and the I-485 together and file it at the same time. If they are in immigration court, then we have more things to worry about. Uh, okay, what were they charged under? Are they an arriving alien? And if they're not an arriving alien, then you can't file the green card application with USCIS. The green card application has to be filed with the um, has to be filed with the court unless the court decides to terminate the case. It becomes a whole other situation if they are in immigration court versus outside of immigration court. But is it possible to get someone that's in immigration court out of immigration court because they're married to a US citizen and they're able to adjust their status? Yes, it is possible. But there's steps to it. So I hope so. There's things to consider. You didn't say any of that in your question, but I just want to make sure you understand there's other things to consider for me to be able to tell you how to go about it. Okay. But the easiest situation would be if they are not in immigration court and they entered with status or they entered with permission, then you can file an I-130 and I-485 with USCIS and adjust their status that way. And then typically after you adjust their status and they have their green card in their hand, you would request for that asylum application to be withdrawn. And that's typically my recommendation for my clients that are in that same situation is to have your green card in your hand and then ask USCIS to withdraw the asylum application, not the other way around. So don't start with withdrawing your application. Start with having your green card in your hand and then withdraw the asylum. All right. Next question. Okay. So I'm guessing the I-485 I'm just trying to make sure I understand. For the form I-864, do the U.S. citizen sponsor have to send any document with the form? I'm not sure what form you. It depends what you're applying for, or that may not be the right form. So it could be an I-765 or an I-485. It depends on the one. Oh, 65 for change of address. So if a US citizen does not need to change their address with USCIS or the US government because they're a US citizen, unless they have an application pending. So if you have an I-130 pending for your spouse or your kids or your parents, and you want to make sure that whatever letter that's sent actually gets to you, you have to change your address when you move with USCIS, not just the post office, because sometimes the post office will not forward immigration mail. Okay? Sometimes they will not forward that. So you want to make sure that you change your address with USCIS when you move. But beyond that, there's not really other documentation that's required. Um, Anyone that's not a US citizen has to update their address with USCIS within like 10 days of moving. Okay. If you're in immigration court, that changes to 3 days of moving. That after affidavit, you still have to update. So it depends if it's the petitioner. You can, there's nothing stopping you from doing it, but there's no like actual um, strict requirements on that. Kelly. So I have this person that got in some trouble, which is resolved, but in the process, his green card was held. Do he need to file a certain application in order to obtain it back? Green card is expired now. So it depends on what the trouble was and why the green card was held. Um, if let's say, for example, they had a criminal case and then it ended up being dismissed and they didn't have like it had no immigration consequence, and the green card was held by, let's say, ICE because they wanted to put them in deportation proceedings or whatever it may have been. If that case is over, right, they can apply for an I-90 to renew the green card. If, because I've seen this happen, if they were in immigration court and they were ordered removed, but were given like withholding of removal or something like that, they cannot renew that green card because they no longer have a green card. So it really depends on their particular situation. If it's just that they, you know, they had a criminal case and they were flying into the US, CBP held on to their green card and but led them into the US, but now the case is over, they can renew the green card. So if it's expired, they can file for a renewal, and then it's up to USCIS whether to renew it or not. And they can base their decision on the fact that maybe they're in deportation proceedings or anything like that. Are persons who are out of status getting detained at their green card interviews? So, really important. If you're out of status, technically you are deportable. Okay. However, the people that we are seeing being detained are people that have an order of removal, right? They already went through immigration court. They already went through immigration court. A judge already found them to be deportable and already ordered them to be deported, but they didn't leave and they're still physically in the US. Now they're married to a US citizen. They file an I-130. They go to an interview. We have seen where USCIS and ICE are working together in those cases to keep the person in the building as long as possible for ICE to get there and detain them. Okay. So that is the situation that we're seeing that in. We are not seeing it in just overstay only, right? Overstay only, we haven't been seeing ICE activity at interviews. Now, if the case gets denied, if the green card application gets denied, that's a completely different issue now, right? Then ICE can, because now they know where you live, they have your information, they can choose to enforce because the person is out of status. And with the NTA memo, USCIS can send a notice to appear for immigration court if they deny the case and the person is out of status. They can do that. But to be detained at interviews, we're only right now, again, I can only talk about what's happening right now. We're only right now seeing that for people that already have an order of deportation. So it's not everyone that's out of status goes to an interview and is detained. It's only in specific situations where they already have a removal order for the person. So basically, if the US government already has a removal order for you, that means they don't need to go through immigration court to get you out of the country. They can just enforce their removal order. Okay, so that's a different situation. All right, I think that's all the questions my cough will allow me to do today. Um, Really sorry about that. I thought I could get through like an hour of this, but apparently not. Okay. Um, Eddie, if you want to like give me, I don't have the form. So I want to make, when y'all are asking me questions, I want to make one thing clear, right? I'm an immigration lawyer, but I have not memorized every single form to know what number 76 on page 19, part 9 of an I-485 says. So the more information you can give me on your question, the better. So can you also add a joint asset from Africa to show proof of household income? Well, household income and household assets are two different things. Okay. So unless that property is producing income and you want to use that income, like that income becomes part of your household income, the property doesn't mean that it doesn't really have any bearing on household income. So there's household assets and then there's household income. So you want to make sure that you are not conflating the two. Okay. Your income is your income. That's the money coming in to you. So if the asset is making money, then that's part of your household income. But if the asset is not making money, then it's part of your household assets. And you can use assets that are not in the US as long as you can show the value of the assets, right? So let's say it's a house that you have in Africa, you can get that house appraised and you can use the appraisal to then figure out, do the exchange rate to see how much it's worth in dollars, right? And that's how you can use that asset. But the asset itself is not household income. Okay. All right. I hope that answered your question. And I'm glad you found that funny because sometimes people forget. Like I can only have so much in my head at a time. I have a lot of immigration knowledge, but the forms they change all the time. Like we literally just had the forms change this year already, and it's probably going to change again at some point before the end of this year. So forms, pages, numbers, I don't know. Okay. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions, if you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and ask me your questions. And then I will be seeing you all um, probably next week, Friday. I should be here we may get to the questions that I had. I had a bunch of questions that I didn't get to, but they came in ahead of time. So I always prioritize the people that are here live. I always prioritize your questions. So I may do another round of Q&As next week. Probably start with updates, because I'm sure something's going to happen between now and then that we may need to talk about some more. So we'll talk about that next week, and then I will also, as always, do Q&As and get to the questions that I thought it was important for y'all to know about, but didn't get time to cover it today. Thank you all so much. I'm glad my cough is not as bad as I thought it would be. I'm hopefully this cold goes away by next week and I don't have to, mute myself to cough a bunch of times. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I truly appreciate you. I will see you next week with more immigration chat. Bye. Have a good weekend.